Welcome to the Tippy Top, the podcast that helps entrepreneurs succeed by sharing best practice and creating alignment with investors. You'll hear from seasoned entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and industry professionals. The Tippy Top helps you learn vicariously because you simply don't have the time to learn every lesson through the school of hard knocks. Welcome back, listeners, to part 2 with Mike Morgan, CEO, NED Chair, and entrepreneur at Channelsphere. And if you haven't already done so, I encourage you to go back to part 1 to hear the intro and the incredible insights that Mike has shared on his very exciting and stressful entrepreneurial journey. Welcome back, Mike. Are you ready for part 2?
Thank you. I am. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks, Alex.
Great. Let's go. So part 2, we're going to deal with how to deal with investors. And then number 2, how to avoid mistakes as an entrepreneur. And then finally, we're going to finish off with exits, the end game, which is hopefully why you're in the business. Sticking with question 1, how to deal with investors. Mike, you've had numerous experiences with investors, including currently. What's the one thing that entrepreneurs don't know?
I don't think it's something they don't necessarily know, but it's perhaps something that they choose not to accept. But you know what I always encourage people to acknowledge is that when you invite somebody else to give you money to finance your venture, you no longer own the business in totality. You're also no longer answerable to yourself alone. And I think an astonishing number of entrepreneurs struggle with the concept of investors placing them under scrutiny and challenging their decisions and, most importantly, demanding results. And I use the word astonishingly because when those same entrepreneurs are pitching for the investment, many of them are seemingly willing to sell their soul to the devil for £250,000, but as soon as the check's cashed, they suddenly develop amnesia about many of the commitments and pledges that they made to the investors during the fundraising process. So I think it's not necessarily that they don't know it; they just choose to ignore it.
I like that word, amnesia. Very vivid. And is it, how difficult is it to raise investment? We keep hearing all these news stories about, the billions and billions worth of dry powder and this person raising 50 million. Is that reality?
Well, it's reality that you can raise those substantial amounts of money, but I think the availability of money for funding startups ebbs and flows over time. I mean, I am old enough to remember the dot-com boom of over 20 years ago. And at that point, VCs on the West Coast were writing the most amazing checks, huge checks for businesses that were just nothing more than an idea, just so they could get onto the bandwagon. But I mean, those days are long gone. I think to answer your question, fundraising is only truly easy if you can demonstrate that you've got a dream team with a killer product or solution to a huge problem in a large and addressable market, and that you've got a long list of customers who love using it. Check all those boxes, and yeah, it's going to be easy. But most of the time, entrepreneurs have 2, maybe 3 of those boxes checked at best, and VC investment criteria remains stubbornly high to this day, for obvious reasons. So I think whilst there's certainly more money out there at the moment, that's the sense I have. I think it's still hard work to get your hands on it, and you have to make sure your business represents a compelling investment proposition that will provide the VC with solid return. and it'll do that within a relatively short period of time. So nothing's really changed in that regard.
And is it within the gift of the entrepreneurs to tick more of those boxes, or is there only a certain number of businesses that you'll actually be able to achieve that with?
Well, if you've got all of those boxes checked, then you're into sort of unicorn territory. And I think it's never black and white, is it? So there are degrees to which you can hit the spot for an investor. I think certainly, the key ones are: is there a defined need that you can satisfy with your solution, and that there's a market that's big enough out there for you to grab a sufficient share of, that you can grow quickly and reach a sizable level in terms of recurring revenue in my space, in the SaaS space. And you can do that in a time frame that's within the zone for a VC. Sometimes you don't have the traction everyone's looking for, but everyone has that gut instinct that under the right circumstances you can do it. Very often you don't have that killer team. It'll be, in the early stages, it'll be the founder, maybe one other person, and then you're really scraping the barrel. We've all done it. We've hammed up those CVs for the investor pitch. Certainly with some more junior members of the team, but no, I think everybody who's going to raise at that level, will say everybody, many people will have certain boxes checked, and others that are grayed out and need development. But that's when it inevitably becomes more difficult to raise the money, and also more difficult to command the kind of valuations that people want, so that they don't face such aggressive dilution.
And it's, sticking with that topic of dealing with investors, it's a big topic. But if you had to pick one bit of advice for dealing with investors, what would it be?
Well, there's two, and you've heard me say these two before, and both of them are slightly tongue in cheek. So the first one is, remember that a VC is for life and not just for Christmas. And I say that because it's important to bear in mind that, once you cross that line and you invite others to have a vested interest in your success, they're always going to be there until there's a liquidity event of some kind. And, they'll always have a vested interest, as you do, in your business, and they will always make their presence known. You do owe them, and for however long it takes you've got a responsibility to them to deliver on the promises you made to them when you made that pitch at their offices. And that commitment, that obligation remains with you until you deliver. The second one, which again is slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I'll explain it, is keep your friends close and your investors closer. And I say this because I've seen several investors several founders, I should say, who start to flounder at some point, or they lose sight of the goal. And as soon as things start to go slightly south, they attempt to create a distance between themselves and the investors. No one likes to be under scrutiny when they're failing, for sure. And I've also, seen founders start to blame investors, like the investors are supposed to be doing something actively to prevent them from making mistakes and to help them to make the right decisions. And sure, as members of the board, they will do that, but you've got to be aware of the limitations that you might expect from investor directors on the board, present company accepted, of course, Alex. But under these situations, I've seen it many times, conflict can really start to arise, and resentment, and you've got to avoid that. for no doubt about it, things will not go to plan. Mistakes will be made. You'll hit bumps in the road. We all do, but throughout, you've got to always communicate with your investors openly, often and early. Don't let any piece of information be a surprise for your investors, particularly bad news. Make sure you get it out in the open beforehand, share it, seek their advice and guidance. Don't wait for board or shareholder meetings to talk. Pick up the phone, because it can be a big, it can feel like a long time before board meetings. And remember that once you lose your shareholding, and this is the scary bit, sorry, but once you lose your shareholding majority, or you lose the confidence of the shareholders, they can and they will replace you if they believe that doing that is in the best interest of the business. And nobody wants to get fired from their own company, but I've seen it happen, and it continues to happen because of this gap that is created, this distancing that is created between the floundering founder and the investors who are waiting for results.
Some cold, hard realities there, and certainly taking on VC doesn't seem like a decision anyone would want to take lightly.
I don't think it is, and it shouldn't be. But why do people do it? They do it because they know that their success will be, or the chances of success will be greatly heightened by having additional working capital, that they'll be able to scale the business quicker. They'll be able to attract the talent that they need to help them to do that. And that ultimately the prize will be bigger than it would be if you did it alone. But as long as you go into it knowing what you're letting yourself in for, and I do think, as I said, the big one is this sort of the sense that, well, it's still my business, and I hear it, I'm sure you hear it as well. Why are they telling me what I should be doing with my business? And I've had to have lots of very frank conversations with founders say, well, no, it isn't your business anymore. They own a chunk of it, and they're there because you invited them in. And that's tough to hear, but it's the truth.
Wise words then. So much we could take away from it. And I guess one of the keys is to, or something that will help that journey is avoiding mistakes. And that's our question number 2. And I think no one ever actively tries to make mistakes, yet they seemingly happen. Is there anything we can do to avoid this, to help mitigate and maybe avoid the mistakes in the first place? And if they do happen, help mitigate their impact?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the reality is that we all make mistakes whenever we encounter situations that you're not prepared for. So what I mean is that you'll make decisions which prove later to be poor decisions because you've never had to make them before, and that's unfortunately the nature of the beast. And you're making these decisions in an environment which is often pressured, and you just don't have relevant experience to draw upon to help influence your decision making. So going back to the point I made earlier about having somebody who you can work with, somebody who you can share with, somebody you can you can draw upon their knowledge and their experience to help influence your decision making, so that you can bounce ideas off them, run through scenarios, and good people will challenge you. They will ask you to play out, okay, if we go with that scenario, what's the outcome going to be in your view? Can you substantiate that? What evidence do you have? What data do you have to back it up? And it forces you to be much more considerate And I think that will definitely improve your decision making. And boards don't necessarily do that, and it's not something that you should absolutely consult your team, but when it comes to making the decision, it's yours to make. So that's something you have to do alone, but you don't have to do it alone, literally. I also think reading a lot, doing a lot of research online, joining entrepreneur groups and startup groups online. There's some good ones on LinkedIn and elsewhere. And also a good one is once you have a VC on board, establish connections with your co-founders of the other companies on your VC's portfolio, because some of those will be ahead of you somewhat. You'll never find a competitive business there, so there's no trade secrets. But I think everyone's got a vested interest in delivering a result for the VC in that case. So those are useful resources as well. But again, I think most importantly, find someone who's prepared to listen to you, challenge you, and test your decisions before you make them.
No, absolutely, very, very wise words. And I just thought of a saying there. There's that saying, if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough, or you're not trying to push the frontiers. How do you tie that back? When is failure acceptable, and when is it a real faux pas?
Failure is acceptable so long as you don't do it too much. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's a tough call to go and present to the board, and particularly to your investors, and say, yeah, I know I screwed up again, but hey, I'm pushing the boundaries here, and if I'm not making mistakes and I'm not pushing the boundaries, that doesn't really wash. It's about using sound judgment, and I think that, look, believe me, I've made a lot of mistakes. So I'm kind of lecturing you here and lecturing the audience just so that you don't do what I did. But I think you can really minimize the number of mistakes you make by, as I said, seeking counsel from others who've been through what you've been through before, or something similar, and who have got the grey hair and the battle scars, and who can. It's not that they're going to tell you what to do or to correct you, but what they'll do is they'll encourage you to use different decision-making strategies, and they will challenge you and test your theories in a way that you perhaps don't want to. Now, I've worked with one particular entrepreneur springs to mind, who sort of seeks advice from others, but only takes away from it the confirmation of their own opinions and their own judgments, and disregards the rest. So you, as well as having somebody to use as a sounding board to help you minimize the number of mistakes, you've actually got to listen to them, and you've actually got to do what they tell you to do. If you don't, then you just keep making lots of mistakes.
Yeah, that confirmation bias that they warn you about, and many people probably fall foul of it, including myself, I'm sure. And you've counseled that we should find advice on the fly that people have from people who have done it before. In terms of your personal journey, what are the main learnings that you took away that you can share with the listeners today?
Yeah, so I won't repeat the one that I think I've said it a few times about finding a friend, advisor, and confidant. Really, really super important. Secondly, we've touched on it earlier on. Stay on mission at all times. Don't stray. I think third one, just a general thing, but keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate your business before it's time. The longer you can keep the business model pure, and the organizational structure it's relatively simple. And I see a lot of people trying to automate everything and bringing in dozens of different software systems and integrating them all to run their business. It's great, but it has to achieve the end state goal. And sometimes they create huge complexity and distract the whole business with this stuff unnecessarily. I think I touched again on another point, which is do everything you do for your customer. And if you stick to that rule, you just won't go far wrong if you've got a product business. We also said earlier on, work hard to make yourself operationally redundant. Because if you do that, that means that you've made some really good hiring decisions and you've imparted your knowledge to those people, and you've delegated responsibility and authority well. And these are absolutely standout features of a good leader and a good founder in a startup business. And that really links on to the last point, which is build the best team you can find from the outset. And every time you meet someone who's better than you, make damn sure you hire them.
Amazing. I've written down 7 points there, which are just so powerful, and I'll include those in the write-up when I release the podcast. Thanks again, Mike. And that brings us on very nicely to the outcome and the end game, which is of course exits. That's hopefully why many of you are in it, and I'm sure the main reason for most of you. A lot of people don't know, and you did touch on this, but when you raise VC, you agree to sell your business. Shock horror. And I wonder how many people actually know that. And I would love to get your, and is it true? But I'd love to get your views.
Well, I think this is a revelation that's closely related to the one that we spoke about earlier on. I've certainly met a good few founders who, when the going gets tough or they've run out of ideas, think it's okay to revert to running a lifestyle business, and then they naively think that the VC will be happy with that. They won't. And VCs, as you well know, expect a return on their investment, and that will mean a sale of some sort. And they also won't wait very long either. So when the VCs check cashes, the clock absolutely starts ticking, and everything you do from there on has got to be demonstrably pursuant to an exit for everybody. And we've talked about that roller coaster ride. After you've raised the cash, everybody thinks that they can relax and take a breather once the cash is in the bank, and actually you've got to really build up your strength beforehand, because once the cash is there, the pressure's on now and the clock is absolutely ticking.
You've mentioned that analogy before, that the fundraising is a click clack of you going up that roller coaster, and as soon as the round closes, the pin releases.
Yeah, but I think but everyone thinks that after you've gone through that experience of the click as you go up to the top, then you get to the other side, and everyone can kind of relax now, because we've got the money and we can hire all the people and we can build the tech we want and we can expand into other countries. And you can't take a breather for a moment, and it's exhausting. Sorry, I don't want to be putting anybody off here, but it's just better that we all hear the truth, right?
And you've seen the fruits of it, so it seems like the juice was worth the squeeze, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Just and I think just in terms of explaining that position from VCs, if you don't achieve an exit, the business, something's gone wrong for both you and the investor, because you shouldn't have gone on that journey. If you just wanted to run a lifestyle business, then if that was the plan all along, don't take the VC cash, because it's not the right option for you. And I think from the investors' side, they're not doing it because they're mean or just have they have LPs, limited partners that they have to report to, who want the money back, because the job of an investor is returning money. It's not investing money. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate that, investors, if you could put it that way, are somewhat of middlemen or middlewomen, to be politically correct.
Mhm.
So speaking more about that exit, and we touched on it earlier, how far in advance should you be planning your exit? A lot of people say, there's a fine balance between saying, I'm hugely passionate about, men's underwear, and this is how we're going to make a lot of money, yet I want to get out as soon as I can. How do you equate those two factors?
Yeah, I'm kind of probably come down on one extreme here. And by the way, I didn't do this first time around, but I probably should have done. I think that your exit strategy should be the last slide in the pitch deck that you deliver to your wife or your husband or your partner, when the idea of the business first comes into your head. Because as you say, if you're building a business to run as a lifestyle business, and it's there to fund your nice house and your nice cars and your foreign holidays, but you're comfortable with just drawing an income from it, then of course you don't need an exit strategy. But the minute you think that you're going to go big and that you'll need some serious working capital to realize your dream, then by implication, and you just said it, you're going to go to VCs, and they're going to want you to sell the business at some point. And so you've got to have that figured out in your own mind. And as we've talked about here, if there's no clear plan for you to capitalize on your years of blood, sweat, and tears, and then there isn't one for anybody else either. And then the question of, well, what's the point? What are you doing it for in the first place? Why are you going to go through all of that suffering that we talked about today? And why the hell would anybody give you any money? And you said that earlier on. I think the understanding the purpose of a VC and their goals, and what are they trying to achieve with the investments that they make and for whom, you really need to understand that and figure it out. And then you need to set your expectations accordingly, because that's going to determine the VC's behavior towards you and their behavior in relation to the business and the decisions that you make. It's also, you got to understand, again, I've had a lot of entrepreneurs being quite critical of VCs because they see them as mercenary, or they don't, they come to my board meeting and they don't say anything constructive. They just want to go through the numbers. Well, most VCs are, from investment banking backgrounds. What were you expecting? So yeah, I think prepare yourself. You've really got to understand, what the purpose of the VC, what their goals are, what they're trying to get out of this, and what they can realistically bring to the table operationally once they're invested.
Yeah, no, well said. I have heard that often it's the finance guy that gets it in the neck, because that's what the VCs really understand, and the tech guy and the ops person, they can be running amok.
Yeah, particularly the CTO. The CTOs usually sit there with a big smile on the face because nobody answers them any tough questions.
Yeah,
they're just doing what they're told. So that's the best job. The worst job is the poor CFO.
Yeah,
because the VCs are all over him or her.
And I think it's worth saying at this point, a lot of people don't know that VCs also raise money. They have to go to other investors, do their pitch deck, go through that whole process. So they're not too dissimilar, in terms of operationally. Obviously, it's a different game, but it's worth understanding that.
Another thing, I know you haven't asked me directly a question related to this, Alex, but one thing I think is really important as well to set expectations is, I hear founders when they're running out of money, which, as you know, happens quite a lot as well, and they sort of say, well, I don't understand it, why my VC won't give me more money. I've gone back and they've been following my progress or the lack of it over so many months or years, and now when I need them the most, they're not willing to put any more money in, and they're surprised by this. And again, that's another thing that I think people really need to prepare themselves for, and again, do their research and understand that a VC's VC is going to, it's not going to put, good money after bad. And eventually they will draw the line and they'll let you find the money from somewhere else. And if you've got no other, if you haven't got a plan B, then they will watch you fail. And that's a tough thing, again, to acknowledge and accept.
And we've had on another podcast, JP Lachetti, and he said VCs want to follow on. They really, really want to. So if you have tied their hands behind their back, they, not as frustrated as you, but they're pretty upset too. So hopefully you don't end up in that scenario.
Absolutely. No, that's entirely the case. And it's when a VC is invested in a business and they build a close relationship naturally with the founder and with several members of their team, and watching that business fail, if it does fail, is heartbreaking. In some cases, the investor director who's sitting on the board was the person who did the deal. And they may have been sitting on that board for years, and they've gone through the trials and tribulations. They don't want you to fail, but they have the limits.
Yeah, and yeah, it's not a good thing for their career. Maybe it's a good mistake and learning, but it's not great.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think a very good question to finish off on is it all worth it, this big exit piece? And as part of that, I'd love you to talk about the dilution that you're likely going to suffer through the rounds, and also in conjunction with the salary you take. Should it be market related? Should it be, spaghetti and water because you're incentivized by this exit? Tell us.
Yeah, this is really tough, and it's a contentious point, because there is a sense that when you found your own business, again, that you still want to be able to maintain a lifestyle, particularly if and we said earlier on, if you're one of the corporate types who had a good lifestyle, and then all of a sudden you're plunged into a world where either you can't afford to pay yourself what you want to earn, or your investors will insist that you don't pay yourself what you want to be paid. And it's really tough. And it's really tough to be told by somebody else when you consider, as we said earlier on, when you consider it to be your business, that you can't pay yourself what you think you're worth, and particularly for the many, many hours that you put in every week. But when you embark on this journey, you do so in the full knowledge that ultimately, by the time you reach the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, there's going to be a whole bunch of people there with you who are going to be, taking their cut. And you're not, once again, you've invited others to put money into your business. It's no longer your business, and the amount you're going to take out of it is going to be less, for sure. At the end of the day, though, it's that old adage, always remains true, which is it's better to have 10% of £50 million than it is to have 100% of nothing. And the reality is that without the investment that you gain, the likelihood is you will build a lifestyle business that will never sell, or certainly will never sell for any substantial amount of money that would make it viable for you to sell it. And the other thing as well, and this is tough, this topic, but it's not just about, is it worth it? The size of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. and I've already made the point that you're not going to get. It's better to take a smaller share of something that's a whole lot bigger than all of either nothing or a small amount. But there is another key thing that I think that founders should consider, and that's this. Hopefully it won't happen to you, but it might. And that is that, at some point in time, you might just look in the mirror and say, you know what, I don't possess the skills, the knowledge, and the experience that are necessary for this company to achieve the mission I set out for it. And at that point, no matter how painful it may be for you, you've got to step down and you've got to bring somebody in to achieve the mission for you. And at that point, again, the second tough decision is, or not a decision, but it's a reality, is that in stepping out of the business and inviting somebody in to run it, you've got to go and find another job, or you've got to hang around and help out, but not draw that big salary anymore. And that's a really painful situation. And then you become a board member of your own company, but you're not necessarily operationally involved, and you're certainly not in charge anymore. But that really is the acid test, I think, of character. Not only am I prepared to pay myself less than I think I'm worth for a few years to get this pot of gold, but am I prepared to, to make the ultimate sacrifice of firing myself in the best interests of the business, and ultimately for me and the return I might make in the future. And that's something, again, that founders should prepare themselves for and be prepared to do if it's necessary.
A very pertinent and difficult question to answer. And yeah, the answer's not on the tip of my tongue, I can tell you that. And to ask you that question again, is it all worth it? After all said and done, and everything you know and everything you've been through and the startups you're working with now, does it have to be about finding a passion? Is it about securing that freedom, that yacht? What is it? And why do entrepreneurs do what they do?
Well, we're all different, so I can't answer that with a single response. Some of us do it for the challenge. Which is why you will see so often that founders will sell a business, make a substantial amount of money, and then they sit around for a few weeks or months, and then they start another business. And you think, why would you do that when you've been through all of the trauma that you've been through, and you've just managed to sell a business? And it is that you need the challenge. You need to be tested daily, and you need to apply yourself to the challenges on a day-to-day basis, and overcoming them, and being, a sense of being victorious. Some people are only interested in the money, and again, provided that the maths add up, so provided that they retain sufficient equity and that they build a business of sufficient value that it can sell and give them a good chunk of money at the end of the day, then of course it's worth it. I think that there is another group of founders, which are the ones who start off with a business proposition that perhaps isn't that strong. They may be ahead of the mark. I can think of a company I'm working with at the moment that perhaps a little bit ahead of the market, and the sales aren't coming quite as quickly as they'd have hoped, and it's tough going, or a whole host of other circumstances, but it just doesn't pan out as everybody planned. So you then get into raising capital just to survive, and you get into down rounds and valuations that are really quite disappointing, and and you keep raising money, and before you know it, you blink and you've got less than 20% equity in the business. That's a really tough one. At that point, you've really got to say, can I do this? Can I turn this around? Can I really build the business that I said I could? And can I sell it for the kind of money that with my shareholding is going to give me what I want? And that it might be that at that point, again, you ask yourself the question, am I the right person to take it from here? So I think that's the latter situation, which, as is the situation that many entrepreneurs find themselves in. That's the worst of all. And that's the point where very often people lose their nerve and they give up. And it all comes then down to your tenacity and your determination to succeed and to not admit defeat. That comes into play then, and that's when you see the tough who survive, and the rest fall by the wayside.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Hugely valuable. And I think, those are insights that you don't hear anywhere else, and never before heard war stories, because it does happen, but no one talks about it. I mean, I certainly, no one's proud to admit it. So it's just very kind of you to really be so candid with us. Both in terms of building the business and working with investors, because it's certainly not always a peachy ride. And now what I'm going to do is try my best and summarize what we've covered, and do interject. But number one, how to deal with investors. Just be ready for that scrutiny and try not have the amnesia about what you've promised. And remember that in Mike's words, a VC is for life, not just for Christmas. I'll remember that one. And then another good one, keep your friends close and your investors closer. In terms of avoiding mistakes, find an entrepreneur who you can bounce your ideas off, who will call you out on your reasoning or lack thereof. Read, join groups, get support. And in terms of Mike's list of 7 top tips, find a friend, keep it simple, stay on mission, do everything you do for your customer, make yourself operationally redundant and strategically indispensable, and build the best team you can find. And that includes hiring people that are better than you. And then finally, on the exits, the end game, understand the journey that you're signing yourself up for, and be ready to roll with the punches, because as Mike's explained, it's not always easy. Now, thanks again, Mike. For the listeners, do you want to one more time tell them where we can find you online and contact you if we need to?
Sure. I'm I think the first ever Mike Morgan on LinkedIn, so I'm pretty easy to find on there. And you can check out my profile there and reach out. I'm open for communication through my website, www.channelsphere.com, and also mike@channelsphere.com by email. Be very happy to speak to founders out there, and if anyone just wants a little bit of free advice, I'm always available.
That's very generous of you. Now, I think we've got some time for some quick fire Q&A still. So, Mike, I'm going to dive straight in. The best city or country in the world?
I love the United States. I lived there for 4 years, and my best time was in the Bay Area, so San Francisco.
Nice. Imagine you have, well, you might do, I'm not sure, £1 billion in the bank. What do you do with it? It's probably not talk to me.
Well, I wish I did, but I think honestly it probably wouldn't be there too long. I think that first and foremost, I want my family to be financially secure and have everything it needed, and I'd like to think that, particularly in my advanced years, that I'd spend the rest on doing some good deeds and helping other people. Particularly, I'd like to help other entrepreneurs build their own dreams. and not just here in wealthy countries, but also in the much neglected developing world, where so many entrepreneurs just need very, very small sums of money to build their businesses, and it's just not there for them. So I'd love to do that.
And I certainly believe you, because that's what you spend your life doing now, helping entrepreneurs. So true to form.
Yeah.
We've had so much advice for entrepreneurs, but one last piece of advice for entrepreneurs, if you had to pick one.
I got to keep coming back to it. I probably said it about 5 times today already. I think you can't make decisions on your own. Get somebody you trust and can confide in, and who has the knowledge, the skills, and the experience that they can bring to bear to help you not to make mistakes, or to make as few as possible, and to make some really good decisions.
Well said. And not necessarily business related, but advice to your younger self.
I think, it's linked to the point earlier on. I think it's seek advice from others. I was too self-confident, arrogant, you might say, and sure of myself. And I didn't pause to find other people to talk to and get advice from. Maybe I was too, as I said, too self-confident, or my pride didn't allow me to do it. But I wish I had done that, because there's countless mistakes that I wouldn't have made if I'd had somebody or gone out there and asked questions of others. Not just one person, but many people I could have spoken to, and I chose not to.
But just on the record, you're in my black book should I have any entrepreneurial tendencies in the future. So anything else you'd like to share with us?
We've discussed so much already today. I think that this is a very tough job to choose, and it's a tough career to pursue. And if you are a founder of a business, an entrepreneur out there, and I want to say that I have the hugest respect for you and what you've done, and I think that's something that we, in the investment community, we perhaps don't talk about that often. It is such a monumental decision to give up your life, your career, and put everything you've got on the line. And many of us do literally that, and to cause the suffering, for want of a better word, for your family. You don't spend much time with them. When you do, you're very often stressed and worrying about various things. It is a monumental step to take, and I have the greatest respect for those entrepreneurs out there. I can only add my words today, just my thoughts and my advice to you, but there are countless other people out there who've been through this before, who actually would love to share their experiences. So don't struggle and don't suffer in silence. Go out and find people to talk to. They're out there. You can find them on LinkedIn very easily. Go and find people to talk to help you through this. Who respect what you're going through and understand it and understand the challenges, and will only be too glad to help.
Thanks again for your honesty. And we had you on our other webinar, and all the entrepreneurs said, Mike understands me. He's been on the journey. I can relate to him. He can relate to me. I will listen to him. And I've never had that across any speaker. It was just the resounding, can we have more of Mike? So I can only echo that. And here you are. So there's more for the listeners. Well, thanks again, Mike. This is an inaugural 2-part episode, and I think all the listeners will agree that it was totally worth doing, and we may even do more in the future if you're still willing.
I've enjoyed every minute of it, and I think that your questions have really helped me to think through some of these things. It's almost been a form of counseling, Alex, actually, for you to be asking me questions about my own experiences, because it's forced me to think through the things that have happened to me in the past, and then figure out how I can create learnings from that. So it's been a real pleasure, and I've enjoyed every minute.
Oh, that's very kind. Thanks so much again, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you.
That's all for this episode. Keep tuning in for more exclusive content on how to succeed as an entrepreneur. Make sure that you follow the Tippy Top on all social channels, including Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, or now Meta, Insta, YouTube, with @the Tippy Top blog. And check out my website, thetippytop.com. And you can also find me, Alexander Lee, on LinkedIn. Until next time, keep pushing, and I'll see you at the Tippy Top. Cheers.